Everyone, we're just waiting for people to arrive, and we'll get started at 10. Okay, people are still trickling in. Can everyone hear me? I know that you guys can't speak, so if a couple of you could just raise your hand if you could hear me. Oh yeah, nice. Okay. Whoop whoop. It's only taken like 6 months, but I'm getting it, guys. We are gonna go ahead and get started right at 10. We have someone here who's presenting on some good stuff, and I know that our article that I made you guys all read was quite lengthy, and I would like to get to that. So we're going to get started promptly. First and foremost, we have Marsha Hazen here. She is going to be presenting on getting the most out of your Segal Education Award. After that, we're going to have our property discussion, which hopefully you all read, and hopefully you all enjoyed the animation on it. And then we're just going to go over housekeeping. So without any further ado, Marsha is here, and we're going to hand it over to her.
All right, can everybody hear me? All right, so my name is Marsha Hazen, and I am a current AmeriCorps program director, but I started my AmeriCorps career as an AmeriCorps Vista, so I've kind of been in your shoes before. And what I discovered after using my first education award was that there were some things that I wish I had known prior to using my education award that as a Vista I just wasn't educated about. And so I kind of took it upon myself to change that. And so I've been giving this presentation now for several years because I think it's a lot of really great information. Want to make sure to kind of give you a couple of disclaimers. So one is that I'm not like a education award expert per se. I'm not a student loan expert. I'm not a tax expert. But again, when I used my education award, that I made some missteps because I wasn't as knowledgeable as I wish I had been. And so I decided after I did a second year of AmeriCorps that I was going to find all that information out myself before making some similar mistakes. So I've now put that together in a presentation, and that's what I'm providing for you today. The other little disclaimer is just that everybody has different kind of situations, different family size, different income, and so I'm not going to give you advice on exactly how to use your education award, but I want to provide you with information that can help you make the best decision for yourself in your own circumstances. So, trying to advance the slides. There we go. All right. So first, I'll just start with a history of the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award. So it started basically right away after they initially started AmeriCorps in 1994. And the Segal Education Award is named after Eli Segal, who's the first CEO of the Corporation for National and Community Service. So that's how it gets its name. So ultimately, the money that's utilized for the education award and also for any interest accrual payments that you would get for your student loans that are in forbearance are stored in the National Service Trust. So this is an account at the U.S. Treasury that pays for those AmeriCorps education awards and those interest accrual payments. So you may have heard that, AmeriCorps funding is kind of up in the air from year to year, but I want to let you know that at the beginning of the year when it gets funded, the money goes into the trust, and so whatever education award you earn during your AmeriCorps service term is there and waiting for you. And so even if AmeriCorps funding down the road, there's any challenges there, you don't have to be worried that your education award is now not going to be fulfilled. So that's where it is in the meantime. So the AmeriCorps portal is where you're going to go to basically request any of those benefits. And so if you haven't already created an account on the My AmeriCorps portal, you'll need to do so in order to utilize your education award and request those interest accrual payments. So it's the myamericorps.gov website. You create an account, and then once you actually receive those benefits, there's a little link on the side that will be available for you to make those requests and to basically decide how much you want to disperse and to where. So the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award can be used for two different things. It can be used to repay qualified student loans or to pay for current educational expenses at eligible educational institutions. So I'm going to be covering both and starting with, what these terms mean. So we'll start with the student loan. So what is considered a qualified student loan for the Segal AmeriCorps Education Award? Well, it's loans that are backed by the federal government. So they're Title IV, Higher Education Act, and also Title VII and VIII under the Public Health Service Act. It does not count plus loans. So those are the loans that parents typically take out for their children. So those don't count. It can also be student loans that are made to you directly by a state agency. So thinking about like state institutions of higher education that make kind of direct student loans to their students. So typically if you fill out a FAFSA and you receive a student loan as part of that, student loan package, most of those are considered qualified student loans. Things that are not considered qualified are really any other type of loan that you would take out, even if it was used for educational purposes. So again, if you go to a bank or you use a credit card for student loan purposes, if it wasn't like something that came to you via the FAFSA and a student loan package, unfortunately, you cannot use your education award towards paying those down. So switching back to what else you can use your education award, you can use it for eligible educational institutions. And so those are higher educational institutions that participate in the Department of Education's Title IV student loan or student aid program. And they're referred to as Title IV schools. And this includes most colleges and universities across the country and also some technical schools. Some of the schools that wouldn't count are like those for-profit universities or some like smaller certificate programs where they provide their own financing. So it's not, you're not filling out a FAFSA, but they're providing a student loan to you in another way. So you just want to be careful about that. But most colleges and universities are Title IV schools. If you don't know, you can Google it or you can just contact the school and ask, are you Title IV school? Also, education award can be used for GI Bill approved programs that are programs of education, apprenticeship programs, and other job training services. So they're ones that have been approved for educational purposes under the Montgomery GI Bill and the post-GI 9/11 bill. So I don't have a ton of familiarity with this, but if you happen to serve in the military and you've received these benefits, then your education award can be utilized towards these programs as well. All right, so another thing that a lot of core members don't realize is there's an interest accrual payment option for members that put their student loans into forbearance. And I've heard of members that have gone through the whole process and just didn't realize that they were eligible for this benefit. This is a separate benefit, so it's not deducted from your education award, which is great. But it's really important to know that you don't get any kind of reminders or anything that are going to pop up and say, hey, you're eligible for your interest accrual payment, don't forget about it. So you have to remember to go back into that My AmeriCorps portal and request this at the end of your service year if this is a benefit that you can utilize. So if your student loans are in forbearance during your AmeriCorps service term, when you complete your AmeriCorps service term successfully or your VISTA service term successfully, the National Trust will pay the interest that accrued on your student loans during the course of your service year. So these interest payments, like I said, is an additional benefit. So it's money that you can utilize, which is great. So how does this work? So basically, once you've completed your term of service, and ultimately your program has to exit you out of the program, which can take a couple of weeks to a month. There's a time frame for that to happen, so no, it's not like instantaneous. But once you've completed your program and you've been exited from the program, you go into that My AmeriCorps portal in the account that you've created, and you'll click on the link that says Interest Accrual Request. At that point, you'll fill in all of the details for the student loans that you had in forbearance during your AmeriCorps VISTA service term. And then you'll request basically the interest to be paid off by the National Trust. It's important to note that if you have more than one student loan in forbearance and they're not consolidated, that you'll want to repeat this step for each one of the student loans that you have in forbearance because you'd be eligible for each one of them. But again, do note that that takes a couple of weeks typically for this whole process to happen. So oftentimes at the very end of your service term, your student loan bill is arriving very quickly. And so I suggest if it arrives fast, that you just pay that first student loan payment and not wait for this to happen because you may accidentally miss a payment. And I've heard of people that have done that, and then their interest rates can go up and it can negatively impact their student loans moving forward. So don't anticipate that this is going to be a quick process. It may take a few weeks to a month, so it's best to pay a student loan bill if you happen to get one in the meantime. All right, got to go back now. All right, so kind of switching over to the Education Award. So the Education Award has some basics that I want to go over with you at this point. So the first thing to know is that your Education Award payments don't come directly to you. They go directly to the student loan holder or to that higher educational institution, to the school. You have up to 7 years, 2 years from the end members under certain circumstances, and unfortunately as VISTA service members, you are not eligible for this option. So just know that you cannot transfer it to a child or a grandchild like some of the other AmeriCorps program members are able to do. The Education Award payments are considered taxable income the year that it's used. And that's what I didn't know my first time around. And so I discovered that I had a much larger tax repayment that was expected of me than I was prepared for. So it's not the year that you earn it, it's the year that you use it, the taxable, that tax year. So if you use your Education Award or any portion of it during 2018, then you'll be paying that the following year for taxes. Members can earn up to the equivalent of 2 full education awards. So depending on what national service that you've done, there are some shorter terms like just a summer term or a half-year term. So those come with smaller education awards, but you're eligible to earn the equivalent of 2 full education awards through any kind of streams of national service that provide the education award as a benefit. And then the other thing that I didn't realize when I was using my education award is that you can use it all at once, or you can divide it up and use portions of it at different times. And so for my circumstances, using my entire education award all at one time to pay down student loans was great because I took a big chunk of my student loans out. But I didn't have, the savings waiting for the tax burden that then I was going to incur. So had I had it to do over again, I would have, because you have 7 full years to use it, I would have paid it out in smaller increments. So maybe $1,000 that first year, maybe $2,000 the second year, and so forth, until I had used up my entire education award. That way, you're spreading that tax burden over several years, which might be a lot easier on your pocketbook. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I didn't write down, but you can also divvy it up any way that you want as far as between a student loan or those educational expenses. So you can use some of it towards educational expenses and some of it towards student loans. So whatever way kind of makes sense for you in your situation, you have that flexibility to use whatever size that you want and towards whichever student loans or educational expenses that you'd like. All right, another thing to receive. So kind of like the compelling personal receiving an AmeriCorps program early, it's kind of similar to that. So you have to have some compelling circumstances. So compelling circumstances would be like a serious illness, injury, or disability to you, a death, serious injury, illness, or disability to somebody in your immediate family, or some kind of major natural disaster that impacts your community. But also things like a subsequent term of service. So let's say you decide to do a second year with your VISTA program or with another AmeriCorps program, you can ask for an extension on the first education award that you received for the length of the subsequent term that you've served. Also, if you serve in Peace Corps, which is a 2-year commitment typically, or in the military, which may be even longer than 2 years, you can apply for an extension for the period of time that you would be serving in either the Peace Corps or the military to extend out the time that you could utilize your education award. It's important to note that you have to apply for an extension before your education award expires. So don't wait those full 7 years before asking for the education award extension. You have to do that while your education award is still available. Once it expires, it expires. So just be aware of that. But how do you go about applying for an Education Award extension? Again, you go to that My AmeriCorps portal account. You click on the My Education Award link, which is there once you've earned your Education Award. And then you just click on the award extension request. You'll have to provide some documentation about your compelling circumstances, and then they would approve it or deny it based on that. So just know that that's an option out there, which is awesome. All right, there's some other kind of things that I want to make sure that you guys know about. And if you are choosing to use your Education Award to pay for college, you can use it at matching institutions and basically double your money, which is really cool. So there are currently about 180 different colleges and universities across the country that match the Education Award dollar for dollar. And it basically is like a scholarship. So you don't have to pay taxes on the match, which is really nice. So to find matching institutions, you can Google AmeriCorps matching institutions. CNCS also has a page where you can click on the map of the United States and they pop up and you can see it that way. One thing to be aware of is that like larger universities, it's not typically the entire university that will match, but it's like the School of Public Policy or the School of, social work that might match. So just be aware of that. But some smaller colleges, they might match for any program that you decide to go into. So if you're thinking about using your Education Award to pay for college, this might be a really good first step to see, are there matching institutions out there that offer programs that I'm interested in, and maybe consider applying there, because it's like a whole nother scholarship, which is really nice. All right, my slides are advancing kind of slow. Try again. All right, I have some notes here, so I can keep moving along even if my slides don't advance. But there's a couple of other types of benefits for just serving in AmeriCorps that you can utilize, and I just want to make sure that you all are aware of them. So one is application waivers. So if you serve in AmeriCorps or AmeriCorps Vista, you may be eligible for a waiver for the application fee to applying for a college or university. So one example that I know of specifically is the Schools of Public Health application. It's about $120, and they waive it for any active AmeriCorps members, basically just making that a lot more affordable for people to apply to those colleges and universities. There's also AmeriCorps scholarships that are available at lots of schools. So it's, always a good practice to contact, the student loan department at your school and just ask, hey, are there any AmeriCorps scholarships that I might be eligible for? Because a lot of schools know that service members really bring a lot of great things to the table, and they want to recruit you all to go to their schools, and so they might provide some financial benefits in order to entice you to choose them. So it's always a great thing to really look into and see if that's some opportunities that you don't want to overlook. If you're planning on going on to graduate school, there are national service graduate fellowships that basically help to provide additional money for your graduate school programs. And then there are even colleges that will provide course credit for the service that you've already done. So if that's the case, you may have to write up a paper or give some kind of a presentation and talk about your AmeriCorps Vista service experience and what you've learned, but they may give you college course credit for it, which would be a really great way to save some money as well, because they're not going to charge you for those credits since obviously you've already done the service. All right, moving along. Again, I'm not able to advance my slides as quickly as I would like, but some people are not really sure how they're going to utilize an Education Award. And obviously in Vista, you have the opportunity to do the stipend payout at the end, which is a great opportunity. But you could also think about utilizing your AmeriCorps Education Award for some like leadership wilderness expedition opportunities. So Outward Bound and the National Outdoor Leadership Schools offer different kinds of lengths of wilderness leadership trainings, and it's considered an educational program, and they do accept the Education Award. And I know that the National Outdoor Leadership School actually matches the Education Award for the longer lengths of expeditions. So the short-term ones don't, but if it's a semester long or longer, they do match it. So it's additional money that you could utilize there. So if you're the kind of person that, you know, loves to hike, backpack, rock climb, sail, you know, there's lots of different opportunities with these two programs, and they do accept education awards. So it's kind of a unique way to maybe utilize your education award and get a really cool life experience and educational opportunity out of that benefit. So we're going to jump into using your education award to pay for school first. And again, it may not be your experience. You might be wanting to use it for student loans, but I'm going to walk you through each one of them kind of separately so that you know the ins and outs of both options. So the first thing to realize is that when you're filling out your FAFSA, you want to list you want to list any AmeriCorps related earnings in the additional financial information section of your FAFSA. So obviously there's like the main page where you list all of your income. And then there is an additional page where you want to list just your AmeriCorps related earnings. So those are like your living allowance that you earned during that FAFSA calendar year. It would be any education award that you've used. It would be any of those interest accrual payments that you've received. And you put those into the additional financial information section. And here's why. Basically what happens is that they subtract the additional financial information section from your main financial section, and it adjusts your gross income and reduces your total kind of income as far as they're considering for eligibility. And the less income you have, the more student aid you're eligible for. So for example, if your only source of income during your AmeriCorps service term was your living allowance, then you'd list it in the additional financial information section. And when they subtract it from your total, which would be the same amount, it would basically adjust your gross income down to maybe $0. So then you'd be eligible for the maximum amount of student loan benefits. So that's really something that's important for you all to be aware of. So we're going to be talking about some financial aid basics. And so it's important to understand a couple of terms. So the first one we're going to talk about is cost of attendance. COA is the acronym that they use for that. And it's basically the amount that it costs to attend a college or university, right? So the college or university is the one who decides what this amount is per semester or per year. And it includes things like tuition and fees, room and board, books, supplies, and even transportation. It can also cover the cost of a purchase of a laptop or a computer. But again, your school is the one that decides what the cost of education is. And you can use your education award for anything that's considered cost of attendance. So some other information that you need to be aware of is what expected family contribution is. So this is the amount that you or your family, if you're still considered dependent on your parents when they claimed you on their taxes, that you're expected to contribute towards the cost of your education. So this is based on your income and other assets that you had during that previous tax year, so your FAFSA year. So that's expected family contribution. And so that's how they ultimately consider what your financial aid package is going to be, because they want to be able to determine what the need is. So the need is the cost of attendance minus the expected family contribution, and then need is the difference. So one thing you want to be very careful about is this status that's called over award status. So if you're not careful about how you use your education award, you could end up in over award status, and it's kind of a nightmare situation. And I'm going to walk you through an example to show you what it looks like. So for my example, I'm using a fictitious individual, and his name is Marvin. So Marvin has served 2 full terms of AmeriCorps, and he's earned around $11,550 of an education award that he has sitting in his, My AmeriCorps portal waiting for him to utilize. He's planning on going to a 4-year university, and he's the first person in his family to attend college. And the reason that that's important is just the fact that he doesn't have a lot of experience maybe with the FAFSA and navigating the student loan and student aid system. So that could be of detriment to him. He's considered a dependent student from a low-income family, and so his expected family contribution is $0. Now, this may not be your situation, but I think it illustrates this point very well. So we're going to follow him and kind of see how things go for Marvin. So the cost of attendance at Marvin's school is $12,066, which I know is very modest. I put this presentation together years ago, and student loan or student college costs have risen substantially, but that's the figure that we're going to use right now. So again, his college determined cost of education, $12,066. And his student financial aid package cannot exceed cost of education, okay? Or cost of attendance, excuse me. So Marvin's financial aid package looks like this. He got a Pell Grant, which is $3,300. He got another federal grant for $300. He has a student need grant for almost $3,000 and some work study for $3,000. And then he has one loan. It's a Perkins loan, and it's again almost $3,000. And you can see that adds up to $12,066, or what was determined to be cost of attendance at his particular school. Well, here's where things started to go wrong for poor Marvin. So Marvin didn't realize, he didn't attend this webinar, that he could put his AmeriCorps earnings in that additional financial information section and have that adjust out his growth. He didn't know to do that, so he didn't. Also, while his financial aid package was processing, and that's the key word, while it was processing, he requested to have his entire 2 education awards deposited into his student account, so to be used towards his current educational expenses. That sounds like a totally, reasonable thing to do with an education award. But here's the issue. What happens is that his education awards put him in over award status because they added the full education award that he had, sent to his school to his current financial aid package, which was already cost of attendance, and it came out to $23,616. So he now, the student or financial aid office now has to reduce his student aid package by $11,550. And here's the problem. They can't send the education award back to the National Trust. So instead, what they had to do was modify his student loan package. So they went back through and basically they take out all that grant money that they had put together in his package, and they reduce that out. So now he has his education awards, which is the $11,550, and the Perkins loan. Now it used to be $3,000. Now it's only $516. But he lost $9,000 in financial aid for him that were grants and work study that he wouldn't have had to pay back. So that was a detriment to him. And he used both of his education awards during that first year of schooling. So unfortunately, things don't get much better for Marvin during his second term of service, right? Or his second year of school. So because he used both of his education awards during that last year, that was considered taxable income during that tax year. So he had to pay like $2,500 in taxes, all right? And since he used $11,500 of his education award as income, his expected family contribution was now $5,600. And so he was eligible for $5,600 less in aid than he would have if he hadn't used his education award. He also didn't realize that he could put all of his AmeriCorps earnings into that additional financial information section, and he could have put the full amount of his education awards, since he had just used them, in that section, and had that change the whole dynamic pretty substantially for him. So ultimately, Marvin lost over $9,000 in his first year of grants, and then he was eligible for $5,600 less in student loans his second year. And so he lost a total of $1,400 in school funding that he would have never had to pay back. Again, he was a low-income student, so he would have had a lot of grants in that package. So unfortunately, Marvin ends his college career with no remaining education awards. He used those during his first year and now has around $21,000 in student loan debt, which isn't a crazy huge amount of money, but it's a lot more than he would have had he utilized his education awards differently. So what would have been a better option for him? It really would have been a better option for him to go ahead and accept the student loan packages that they were providing. Again, it was a lot of grant money and a relatively small student loan. At the end of his 4 years, he would have only had about $12,000 in student loan debt. At that point, he could have used that $11,550 of education award that he had, maybe even over the course of a few years, and paid down that student loan, which would have left him with only $450 in outstanding student loans. So you can see for him, it really made a huge impact on his experience. So ultimately, the thing to remember is that when you're filling out a FAFSA, you want to add that additional financial information section with all of your AmeriCorps earnings. So any living allowance that you earned during that calendar year, any interest accrual payments that you received during that calendar year, and then the education award payments that you dispensed during that time, because that's going to adjust your gross and make you eligible for more student loan package or more student aid. Also, it's really a good practice to just contact your financial aid counselor at your school and explain to them, I have an AmeriCorps education award, but I don't want to use it if it's going to cause me to lose aid. And AmeriCorps has been around for over 20 years now, so most financial aid offices are familiar with utilizing it, and they can really help you navigate that system. So that's kind of just one thing to be really cautious about if you're using it to pay for school. So we're going to switch gears now and talk about using it to repay student loans. So we're going to start with, again, some basic principles just to make sure we're all on the same page. So the first concept is principal, which is the amount that you ultimately borrow. And then interest is the money that's added to the principal that the lender gets to keep. So it's the reason that they give you the loan in the first place, because they ultimately make money off of it. So you pay back more than just the principal when you're paying back a loan, any kind of loan, whether it's a student loan or not, because you're paying principal and interest. So there's really kind of two ways that you can utilize your education award for paying down student loans. Basically, what's going to happen is you're going to make a lump sum payment, which means that you're paying a larger amount than one monthly student loan payment. You're going to pay for, several months worth of student loans, or you're going to pay a larger amount towards your principal. So you can do it one of two ways. You can have it advance your payments, or you can have it pay down your principal. So we're going to start with advancing your payments and talk about the pros and cons of both options. So advancing your payments, this happens automatically. And ultimately what happens is the money that you say, hey, I want my education award to go towards my student loans, the amount that they send will advance out the amount of student loan payments, those monthly payments that it's able to cover. And ultimately, the benefit to this is that you don't have to make another student loan payment for the amount of time that was covered by your lump sum AmeriCorps Education Award payment. So it allows you to kind of postpone making additional student loan payments. So it gives people the option to kind of take a little student loan vacation, so to speak. So I'm going to give you an example so you can see it kind of in dollars and cents. So if your student loan payment is $100 a month, a nice round number, and you use an education award of about $5,730, that was last year's education award. So the lender, if you made that entire amount as a lump sum payment towards your student loan with your education award, the lender would advance you 57 payments, because it would cover 57 payments worth of $100 student loan payments. And so you wouldn't have to make another payment on your student loan for 57 months, which is the equivalent of 4 years and 9 months. All right. So there are some things to really consider with this. So the downside is that after that, 4 years almost 5 years, that your payment amount is going to probably be the same. So if it was a $100 monthly payment, once that time period goes by, the very next student loan bill that you get is going to be for the same amount probably. And the total loan balance may not have changed substantially. And here's why. The student loan payments that you're making, they always go towards paying interest first and then principal. And so especially at the beginning when you're paying any kind of a loan, more money of your payment is going towards paying the interest than it is the principal. And as you get further down and you've paid off your loan substantially, then more of it starts going towards the principal than the interest. That's just how loans work. So because you continue to accrue interest based on how large your principal is, the larger your principal is, the more interest continues to accrue. So if you pay this way, it pays a lot of interest first, but may not substantially take a dent out of your principal. So that's something to consider. But the positive is that, again, you aren't having to make additional payments in the meantime. So if your, work situation is kind of up in the air and you're not really sure, it's a great way to get some time where you're not having to make those payments. But here's another thing to consider, is you can continue to make payments kind of at your own discretion. So most of the time you're able to continue to make payments without any kind of penalty, even if they've advanced your payments out and one's not due. So you could make smaller payments, you could make less frequent payments, and those continue to add up over time. And you can have those applied to principal if you want. So that's a nice way to just give yourself some flexibility. And so if you get some money here and there, you can throw it towards your student loan. Or if, let's say, you feel comfortable, you can afford $25 a month, but not that $100 a month, you can pay $25 and continue to, reduce your student loan debt over the course of the time that your AmeriCorps Education Award reduced. So the other option is having a lump sum payment towards your student loan be applied towards principal. And this option allows you basically to pay down principal rather than advancing those student loans. And so it reduces your overall kind of loan balance, which can make a really big difference in the long term of how much you're actually going to be paying towards your student loan. All right, so here are the pros and cons of paying down principal. So the pro is obviously that you're going to be paying less over the life of your student loan because, again, you're going to be accruing interest at a much slower rate because your principal is going to be smaller. And the other potential positive side is that your student loan payment, the actual amount that's due each month, may be adjusted and may be lower moving forward. So paying down principal might be a better option for you. The downside is that you don't get that same kind of student loan break that you would if they advanced your payments out. So if you do a lump sum payment and you have it be applied to the principal, the very next month, you're going to get a student loan payment bill, and they're going to expect you to pay it. So you don't get to take that same kind of a break. But do know that you can make, again, any kind of you can decide how you want to have things applied. So you can take a little student loan vacation by having it advance out your payments, let's say for a 6-month period of time, and then pay down principal. So, you're not stuck with using your entire education award for one or the other. You can do it in smaller increments and make those adjustments based on your personal circumstances. So if you want to have any student loan payment from your education award being applied to principal, you have to contact your student loan holder and tell them to do so. This does not happen automatically. And this is actually what I did the second time I had an education award. So I had to call my student loan holder and say, hey, I'm getting ready to request $2,500 of my AmeriCorps Education Award to be sent to you all, and it's going to be a lump sum payment, and I want it to be applied to the principal. And then it's really important that during that conversation that you're taking some notes. So who did you talk to? What time and day did you call? And it's also important to ask them to send you confirmation in writing. That can be really beneficial. And follow up and be persistent. So in my personal case, I called, I had this conversation, I noted down when my call was, and then when the payment got processed, they advanced out my student loan, right? They advanced out the payments. And so I had to call them back and say, hey, we had a conversation on such and such date and time. I spoke with this individual. I asked that the lump sum be applied to my principal, and unfortunately it did not get applied to my principal, so I need you to reverse that and apply it to my principal. So you may have to follow up and be persistent about this, because again, it's in the best interest of the student loan holder to extend out and advance out your payments, because they ultimately make more money doing it that way. So that's their default. So this one takes a little bit more time and energy, but maybe worth it in the long term for you if this is the best option for your personal circumstances. The other thing to be aware of is that, sometimes core members want to consolidate student loans. And, that way you just are making, one student loan payment instead of multiple student loan payments to different student loan holders. What CNCS recommends is that if you decide to consolidate your student loans, make sure that the new consolidated loan is considered a qualified student loan that's backed by the federal government, because you don't want to consolidate your loans and then discover that this is not an eligible or qualified student loan and you wouldn't be able to use your education award towards it. So it just takes some, diligence in the process. So if you're considering consolidating a loan, just make sure that throughout the process that you're consolidating it into a loan that would be considered a qualified student loan backed by the federal government, so you could still use your education award towards it. If you need help with that, I would suggest contacting the AmeriCorps hotline. On the handout that I provided, if you haven't received a copy of it, I'm sure that they'll send one to you, but it's the National Service Hotline. It's a 1-800 number, and they are the experts when it comes to all things, AmeriCorps and navigating the system, but also the education award. So if you need help with that process, you have questions, they're a really great resource to utilize at that point. All right, just some other options and things to consider. So this is kind of, beyond the AmeriCorps Education Award. These programs are available to others, non-AmeriCorps. But in 2007, there was a couple of different federal programs that were created that can help people that have student loans. So one is the Public Student or Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and the other is the Income-Based Repayment Plan. So I'm going to talk really briefly about both and give you some information about where you can find additional information if you're interested in considering these. So the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program is the first one that I'll talk about. And this one basically offers student loan forgiveness for outstanding federal direct student loans. It can't be any other type of student loans. They have to be federal direct for individuals that make 120 qualifying payments while working full-time in a public service job. So if you're planning on going on to work in nonprofits as a teacher or some kind of public service type of career, firefighter, police officer, things like that, and you have larger student loans, this might be a really great option for you. You can find out more about this program at finaid.org, or you can just Google the Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program. The couple of little details. One is that the qualifying payments don't have to be consecutive. So let's say that you have a job that's in the public service sphere for a while, and then you are, take a job someplace else or part-time job that wouldn't qualify. You're able to then, once you get full-time public service work again, to continue to make qualifying payments. So that 120 qualifying payments is ultimately 10 years worth of payments. There is some forms that you need to fill out. There's like employee verification forms. So as you're working in those public service jobs, you'll be providing that form to your employer for them to fill out to say, yes, they were working full-time. Yes, it's a public service job. And then ultimately you apply for the actual public service loan forgiveness program once you've reached that 10 years and you've made the 120 qualifying payments. The other program that exists is called the Income-Based Repayment Plan, or IBR. So this helps students repay loans basically when they're low income, and so it adjusts your student loan payment to be affordable for low-income borrowers. So there's this very complicated formula right here about how they kind of calculate that, but the really nice thing is that they have an IBR calculator that you can utilize. So again, it's available at finaid.org, or you can Google IBR calculator and just plug in your details, and it'll kind of give you an estimate of what your adjusted student loan payment might be. So if you're single and you just make your AmeriCorps, living allowance, your monthly payment could be as low as $0 in this program. And then if you pay a $0 payment towards your student loan, it could qualify as a qualifying payment for the public service loan forgiveness program. So you can use both programs together, and you can utilize them during AmeriCorps. Now, here's the caveat to that. You can't be making qualified payments while your student loan is in forbearance. So if you have your AmeriCorps, or if you have your educational, or if you have your student loans in forbearance during your during your AmeriCorps service term, you may want to consider taking them out if you want to do this program. But it's pros and cons again, because if your loans are not in forbearance, then you're not going to be getting that interest accrual benefit. So, you might be saving money in one way and costing yourself in another. So just be aware that there's always pros and cons to any choices that you make. But both of these programs currently exist, and you can learn about them at finaid.org. And they might be a really great option for you either during your AmeriCorps service term or after your AmeriCorps service term to help you, pay down your student loans. A couple of other things to consider. So like any kind of repayment program that allows you to pay less per month, you may end up paying more over the full course of your student loan, because again, you're going to be accruing interest on that principal for a longer period of time. So that might be a challenge there. But again, if you're using both programs and you're working in a public service field and making those qualifying payments, they might be able to basically forgive any of that loan that is outstanding. So again, things to consider when you're thinking about these options. All right, so a couple of other resources that I just want to make you all aware of is on the National Service Resources.gov page, there's a little Ed Awards section, and they have what they call stories to learn by. So it's basically, I think there's like 6 or 7 different little vignettes that you can watch. So you can pick one that's similar to your circumstances and kind of watch those and see what kind of recommendations CNCS has for your particular circumstances. So that's a great resource for you to kind of, consider what options might be best for you for your particular circumstances, because this is going to give you a couple of different scenarios that you can consider. Like I said, finaid.org has a lot of great resources, and one is the Student Loan Guide to Financial Aid. So if you are considering going back to school and planning on filling out a FAFSA, I'd highly recommend getting this guide and reading through it. That National Service Hotline that I talked about, that's the number to contact them. And again, you can tell them, your exact scenario, and they may be able to help answer, really specific types of questions that you have for your personal circumstances. The other thing that I've heard of is members going, okay, well, if I spend X amount of my education award, is that going to push me into a higher tax bracket? Like, how can I estimate how much my tax burden is going to be based on how much education award I want to use in a particular year? So what I've heard is that you could download the 1040 form, and you can basically plug in your income for that year, and you can download a form and you can plug in, what you're planning on using for your education award, maybe a couple of different scenarios, and seeing what your taxes would look like with that form. So that can help you kind of get a rough idea about what your tax burden might be with a smaller amount of education award or a larger amount, like if it's going to make the difference to push you into a different tax bracket, or to just help you get a better idea of how much tax burden you might have from a particular amount of education award that you've utilized. So one other resource that I just want to make sure that you all know about, since it is, getting into tax season, is the VITA program. So it's a volunteer income tax assistance program. And basically these individuals provide free income tax preparation for individuals and families earning up to $54,000 annually. So a lot of people can benefit from this program. The VITA volunteers can help families take advantage of all the different tax credits that they're eligible for. They're really specifically trained on helping those lower earning individuals and families find all of those tax credits. And the really nice thing about the VITA program is that there's tons of different locations in communities that you can utilize to get this done. So they're at community centers, libraries, churches, schools, things like that. So you can locate a VITA site by calling the number that I have listed there, or you can just, again, Google VITA sites, or there's an IRS site that talks about the VITA sites as well. So this is a great opportunity for AmeriCorps and VISTA members, but also for the individuals that you're serving. They might not know about this resource. I've personally used VITA in the years that I did AmeriCorps, and I found it hugely beneficial. It's kind of like a little H&R Block for low-income individuals. And the nice thing is that if you go back to the same place year after year, they save your information just like an H&R Block would, so you don't have to plug it all back in year after year. So I highly recommend them, and want to make sure that people know that support is out there. There's also some online programs. I know AmeriCorps alum typically has an online tax preparation option for members to utilize free. So if you feel more comfortable doing your taxes yourself and just want to use an online free option, I would suggest going to the AmeriCorps alums website and seeing what's out there this year. All right, so I am open to any questions that you might have.
Okay, Marsha, it's Zakia. I have a couple questions that have been asked throughout your presentation, just two. So this is, if you have any more questions, just keep them coming and I'll read them from either the chat or the questions box. But our first question was if the interest accrual repayment could be used with the cash stipend instead of the education award.
If the interest accrual
like the repayment, so when you put it in forbearance, will the government pay your interest with your cash stipend?
Yes, because it's a separate benefit. It's not linked with the education award. So as long as your loans are in forbearance during your AmeriCorps service term, you can request that benefit even if you choose to use the stipend. That's an excellent question.
And then one more. Do you know if there is something like the income-driven repayment for private loans, or if that's all institutional, like institutionally based, that decision?
Yeah, I do not know that detail. So again, I would just highly recommend looking up the IBR program and trying to find some details about that. I didn't have any private loans for my schooling, so that wasn't a situation that I was looking into. But it's a program that's been around now for over 10 years. And so I'm sure that they'd have those details available for you to find yourself.
And I would encourage, if anyone has private loans, I know I have a couple private loans, if you can't like afford your payment, to reach out to your institution and let them know. And they really just want their money, so they'll probably be willing to work with you a little bit and see what they can do to get some of a return on their investment.
Right. Yeah. And there's other kinds of like forbearance and deferment options. So even if you're not in AmeriCorps at the time when you're dealing with a financial hardship, you're able to request student loan forbearance or deferment based on those circumstances. So my guess is that there probably is some options out there for those situations too.
Perfect. Do we have any other questions for Marsha?
Oh, I want to just give you one other little quick heads up. So I've been giving this presentation now for a number of years, and on the Michigan Community Service Commission website, there's an AmeriCorps resources page, and they have a copy of this. It's my old slides, but it's all the same information that's available just on the web. So there's been individuals that are like, hey, how can I find this information maybe 2 or 3 years down the road once I'm out of AmeriCorps and, you know, really making some decisions about how to use my Ed Award. So that's a great opportunity to find this information when it's the right time for you. So it's the Michigan Community Service Commission's website, and it's listed under AmeriCorps resources.
Awesome. Okay. One more question. Jarrell says that he understands that the student loan forgiveness program is in jeopardy if someone signs up for the program before it's officially defunded. Is there protection for that? Are they locked into that program?
Probably not. So here's the downside is that you don't actually apply for the program until you've already met the 10-year eligibility. So you've already made those 120 qualifying payments. You've already worked in a public service job for 10 years. That's when you actually apply to the program, is at the end, not at the beginning. So it is a bit of a gamble in our current economic or political situation. So, you know, I think if you're interested in doing it, I would highly suggest doing like getting the employment verified along the way. But is it a sure thing? Probably not at this point. It's been around for 10 years. It currently is in existence, but 10 years down the road, who knows?
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions that we have. I really appreciate you being here and presenting this. I know that I just used my education award, and it is definitely its own beast. We have this recorded, so if anyone needs to refer to it later, it will be up on our site, so you can use it as reference whenever you do decide to use that or whenever you fill out your FAFSA. So thank you so much, Marsha.
Thank you. Oh, you're very welcome.
Have a good day.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So y'all guessed it. We're totally about to skip this poverty discussion. It was only like a novel, so if any of you didn't get through it, you have another month. Can you forward it through to the end? So we're just going to go straight to housekeeping, and then we're going to wrap up so y'all can get back. Also, there's a meeting in this room, so we're going to try and get through this super quick so that if anyone has questions, you can stay for a second. So February 28th, big day. We have mid-year evaluations are due, so you and your supervisor should be sitting down and going through your mid-year evaluation, and we need timesheets and your monthly reports due. For new vistas on the line, don't worry about mid-year evaluations. That doesn't make sense for you, and we'll go over your timesheets and reporting at post-PSO. For those of you attending the MCAN conference, that's March 12th and 13th, and then mid-year training is March 14th and 15th, and that is a requirement for everyone. We want to remind you guys today that in the weekly update for today, we sent out some VITA information too. So Mary is on top of that. you can also use that as a reference if you are worried about taxes or anything at all. So I'll stay on for like 30 more seconds in case anyone has questions. But aside from that, thank you guys for joining us. Oh, wait, sorry, one more thing. Next month's webinar is March 7th. We're just going to do this poverty discussion. So we don't want to overload you with information if you're going to the conference and mid-year training. So we will be going over this whole article that I sent you, and we'll be dedicating it to a poverty discussion. So we will get to it, I promise, next month. So have a good day, a good month. Happy Valentine's Day. Send me Valentine's.
Happy Valentine's Day.
So we're signing off. Bye, guys.